Charles Dickens was a great and sharp critic of bureaucracy, which he vividly illustrates and mocks in his novels like Bleak House and Hard Times. His portrayal of the bureaucratic systems of his day highlights, particularly the legal systems, highlights their inefficiency, complexity, and the indifference to the individual, and the anonymity. And the issues that Dickens brings up then in the 19th century are still valuable today. In Bleak House, in the Court of Chancery, the scathing depiction of the Court of Chancery, the institution notorious for inefficiency and the interminable legal cases. But just look at the post office scandal today. Jarndyce and Jarndyce case, a prime example symbolizing the endless and convoluted nature of bureaucratic processes. Malkinson, the Jarndyce and Jarndyce drones on. This scarecrow of a suit has, in course of time, become so complicated that no man alive knows what it means. Well, we might as well whip out the Windrush problem. The absurdity, the futility of the legal system, where cases drag on endlessly for years without resolution, consuming the lives and fortunes of those involved. So the people, the individuals, die before there is ever any resolution. Mr. Crook's chaotic shop, filled with legal documents and papers, represents the disorganized, impenetrable nature of bureaucracy. Everything seems to be bolted and barred up, as if the day of judgment were tomorrow. The stagnation, the decay, and the overwhelming sense of doom, the day of judgment. Characters like Richard Carston become entangled in this web of bureaucracy, their lives consumed and ultimately ruined by their dependence on the outcome of the legal proceedings. It's a slow, expensive British constitutional kind of thing. It's all right enough. I shall never marry anybody else, my dear, but I am determined to try this. Determined, yes. And it's about pushing through despite the failure of the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is there to support us, not to dominate us. It's in the word. This is the problem. Aristocracy, the rule of the best. Bureaucracy, the rule of the bureau, the rule of a table, the rule of a piece of wood. Wood rule. In Hard Times, Mr. Gradgrind's philosophy. We want nothing but facts, nothing but facts. This utilitarian obsession, but to the point of the exclusion of real people. A system that values rigid adherence to rules over the complexities of human experience. And the computer says no. The Coketown setting, with its regimented mechanical lifestyle, symbolizes the dehumanizing effects not only of technology but of bureaucracy. It was a town of red brick, or of brick that would have been red if the smoke and ashes had allowed it, but as matters stood, it was a town of unnatural red and black, like the painted face of a savage. And you think of the word barbarian, the Greek word that becomes Latin, but it's based on this Greek idea that the savages that were not Greek, people who didn't speak Greek, just made noises, ba, 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 like sheep. The monotonous and oppressive environment. And indeed, Farage is one of those who thinks that everybody outside his particular orbit must be a barbarian. We don't live in that divisive, exclusive community anymore. We live in a diverse and inclusive society, and bureaucracy excludes, and that is the problem. It excludes, it stops, whereas it should be enabling. The plight of workers in the book, the struggles of the working class, epitomised by characters like Stephen Blackpool, highlight the indifference, the inflexibility of bureaucratic systems, and Stephen's despair reflects the hopelessness and the frustration felt by individuals caught in the rigid structures of bureaucracy. Dickens' critique of bureaucracy is a powerful condemnation of the inefficiency, the complexity, the dehumanizing aspect of this sort of mountain, this growing mountain of impenetrable paper, and the detrimental impact of this on society, on people, on individuals, and what can we do about it? Bureaucracy in Britain has been of great value. If you go back to the East India Company, the East India Company going back to 1600, a key example of early British bureaucracy, a powerful trading entity. East India Company required structural administration to manage its vast commercial and political interests in India, and this led to the creation of this complex hierarchical system and procedures and the triple bookkeeping thing, and it's beautiful in its simplicity and its order, but it's got out of control. The expansion of the British Empire in the 19th century, which arguably necessitated the expansion and the promulgation, the evangelizing of the world in the bureaucratic system, in order to allow civil servants to administer the colonies and manage the logistics of governance and trade. Great in its vision, but it became harsh and unthinking about individuals. And there you have it. Domestically, the Victorian era saw this growth of public institutions and the professionalism of the civil service, marked by reforms like the Northcote-Trevelyan Report of 1854, which aimed to make the civil service more meritocratic. But it was already getting top-heavy. It already needed reform, not just reorganization. And this is the problem. Bureaucrats want to reorganize what they've already got. Clean the desk. Tidy the desk. Tidy up. There are times when you just need to get rid of a lot of the paperwork. And particularly when it's inefficient. Bureaucracies become bloated and top-heavy. Excessive red tape, slow decision-making processes, a lack of responsiveness to individual need. They become complex and over-regulated themselves. So you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know who is responsible for the decisions that you are receiving. You can't get a name very often when you're speaking to somebody. And different groups, of course, they do different jobs, but they don't seem to collate the information, or at least not in any speedy way. And I find this extraordinary in the age of the computer. I find it extraordinary that the notes you get in your GP surgery should be different to the notes you get in the hospital. And similarly with the banks. Bureaucracies suffer from a lack of accountability, with civil servants being insulated from the consequences of their actions because nobody knows who they are. And yet they're paid buckets for what they do. I mean, of course, there are civil servants who are not paid enough, of course, and they probably do far more work than anybody else, particularly in other countries. I remember being taken to the police, one of the police stations in Greece, and being pointed out the person with the full desk is the fellow who's actually doing the work, whereas the person with the empty desk and all the glory and the badges, that person doesn't do anything, and yet that person is paid more. I hope we're not at that stage. I hope we're not in that position, but we're not far off it. We're not far off it, and we need to need to make sure our bureaucrats are fully accountable, and that this institutional inertia is challenged. Bureaucracies are resistant to change. They perpetuate outdated practices and they hinder modernizing efforts. And this is one of the reasons why Brexit needed, or why Europe needed to change. And Brexit may well have been a kick that has helped Europe to change. But we have not. We seem to have now got additional and impenetrable paperwork. We've got more paperwork now than we had when we were in Brexit, or than we were in Europe. It's a nonsense. But I am delighted that Europe is beginning to find its way through that undergrowth, that forest of paperwork. There are reasons why bureaucracy has exploded. The public sector expansion, the expansion of the welfare state in the 20th century, which of course increases the public sector, adding new levels of bureaucracy to manage social services, healthcare, education, and so on. The regulations driven by a need to ensure compliance, to protect public interest, that again helps to increase, to add to the growth of bureaucracy. The advances in technology and the advances in computing oddly increase technology, because we now have the written version plus the online version. We have parallel forms of bureaucracy. We don't actually know which version of the bureaucratic system we're entering the details into. And even on the computer, we've got multiple versions. We need to trim. We need to embrace a digital transformation to streamline processes, but at the same time take protection, make sure we are protected against digital tyranny. We need to decentralize, devolve powers and responsibilities to local governments and trust local governments that they are going to do their job, rather than be constantly looking over their shoulder and doing it for them. We need to trust in order to have and build responsive and responsible government. We need to simplify and review existing regulations to eliminate unnecessary complexity and to reduce the administrative burden on businesses and individuals. We need to introduce better performance-based management systems to hold civil servants accountable, rewarding excellency, penalising poorer performance, and getting rid of the dross, getting rid of the stuff we don't need. Not necessarily the people we don't need, getting rid of the rubbish, the waste paper bin. And we need to leverage public-private partnerships to deliver smoother services, more efficient services, drawing on innovation and the expertise of whatever system happens to be around. If we can learn from the private system, we can learn from the public system. We can learn from people in other countries. We need to learn from the best and set our goal as perfection. We need to foster a culture of continual improvement within the civil service, within business, encouraging innovation, adaptability, and to focus on outcomes rather than processes. And by understanding the historical roots of bureaucracy and the challenge that it now presents to us, we should be able to target reform. We should be able to effect reform if the will is there. But I'm not sure the will is there. And people who are locked into these top levels of bureaucratic systems, who quite often are doing very little in their office and have done very little to get there. They've just happened to have said as little as they possibly can in their progress up the ladder of success. They are the most resistant to change, of course, because they are redundant. And we need to measure the value of the paperwork we are accumulating, whether it's on a computer or whether it is literally paperwork, and we need to streamline stuff. And if this present government does nothing else but try to encourage that, it will have done some good. But I think it's a monumental, it's a mammoth task, and I don't hear people talking about it. I hear people adding to bureaucracy rather than removing it. So when blame is apportioned, it's very difficult to hold any individual or any particular group responsible. But at the same time, we are more interested in apportioning blame than we are in improving the system. We want to we want to say, oh, you did it. Let's put you in prison. Let's hold an inquiry. Let's have a public humiliation. Let's make you cry at your desk. But we need to learn lessons and change the system so that these problems don't occur again. We need to get things right. Instead of setting things right, instead of getting rid of what is wrong, we seem routinely to add another level of bureaucracy to the already growing tree. And the only thing that grows in Britain at the moment, the only thing that we can be sure grows day after day, hour by hour, is our bureaucratic mountain, and that needs hacking into and pulling down. We need a bureaucracy that supports us, that doesn't envelop us, and that doesn't dominate us.